would like to know maybe a time frame that this letter will be going out to the neighborhood. In addition, because we've already moved forward with the project that's going on right now that we have to all fund, but we're not even sure how we're paying for it amongst, as a community, from my understanding. So I'd like to know a time frame in which this is going to happen, so we have, an idea if we can come back and discuss this. Thanks.
Rob Langlois, East Archer. It seems a very preconceived notion that this decision's been made already. And the Party Bridge removal has been brung up so many times, yet it was completely dodged at the meeting. It was completely dodged here again about spending how many taxpayer dollars to send out a letter with two options and not include the Party Bridge removal in it. Now, back in the past, the Party Bridge removal was set to go. It was voted, and it seemed like it was going to go from what I read. But I will say back in that day, the Party Bridge was still a functional, good bridge. So it stayed. Now, it is not a functional bridge. So your proposal is to replace a bridge we don't need, and now when it's not usable, then put it as low as it is, which makes it an intrusion on a navigable waterway, which I'm surprised the Army Corps even lets that go, because there's so much into this navigable waterway, but you want to drop it down where you can't get a rowboat under it. It's a total waste of money. Take it out, fix the Lakeshore Bridge, tax us all evenly, and we'll pay as a neighborhood, and let us come up with some kind of petition to make that happen. Don't make the decision for us. We don't need you to do that.
Ken Mulder, I live on East Archer. It's been discussed amongst the neighbors if there could be two special assessment districts proposed to the neighborhood, one including the three bridges, Archer and the two Lakeshore bridges, that I think could very easily get the community to come together on a decision on how to divvy up that special assessment, so that the township would be able to move forward on securing funds for those bridges and leave the Party Bridge as a separate special assessment. Obviously, there's a lot more conversation that needs to be involved with either replacing or removing that bridge. So I'd like to know if there's an option for that. As far as including the Venetian, the residents on Lakeshore, especially the residents on the lakeside, it's a question actually for the attorney as far as if they formally protest the SAD, what chance or what grounds they have to stop the SAD with a protest if they're included on it. I do think that if the letter goes out, it needs to go out to not only the 676 residents that you're proposing, but also to all the members, regardless of whether or not they get to vote, but so that they know what is going on in the community. There was a sample petition that was started to be circulated amongst the residents to get an idea on how they felt. If the board would like that, I do have copies of that as somewhere to start as far as how to move forward on the petition. Also, in the interest of safety and liability with the removal of the Party Bridge, when there was the gas main hit on South River Road that prevented everyone from either leaving the subdivision or accessing the subdivision, there didn't seem to be too many concerns over safety or liability for creating a second means of egress for the neighborhood when that occurred. So I'd like to know if that was ever an issue, or also when the other bridges in the neighborhood were removed, because they were removed at one point, who assumed liability at that point for the removal of those bridges? I guess that's all I had. I thought I had something else, but I'll come back if I remember.
Hello, my name is Susan Raymond. I live at 37641 Lakeshore Drive. And I just wanted to go on the record that I am also in agreement that everybody should pay the same amount fairly. We did do an informal vote when we were at the church, when we had a meeting there, and it was very unanimous that everybody agreed that we should pay even Steven. However, Venetian was not included in that, so I just wanted to mention it. So, and I also wanted to say thank you to the board for all the support you've given us. You guys have been very helpful at our meetings. Thank you for that. And I do have a question. If you know if the two lanes on the big bridge will be open, or will it remain one lane? Thank you.
Dean Smith, Riverdale Street. I would concur that probably Venetian should not be involved in our Huron Point. But I do believe everyone that has a Lakeshore address or a Archer address or Riverdale, Huron Point, Lakeville should be created equally, because that's a benefit to the whole subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Raymond, Lakeshore Drive. I don't think that paying for all 4 bridges when I cross 2 of them on a daily basis is fair at all. In fact, if we're gonna split it by the bridges you cross to get to and from work or to and from the neighborhood, I never cross those other bridges, maybe once or twice a year, and it's certainly no more than any other resident crosses any of the bridges in the neighborhood. So we should keep that in mind, that just because they don't live on south of the second bridge doesn't mean they don't cross it any more than I cross the Pardee or the Archer Bridge.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris King. A few points here. First of all, removing the Party Bridge, we talked about this last week, that it's a cost bared by the township, and removing it, the grant doesn't fund that. Well, there's already precedents within this neighborhood that they've removed the spans and left the embankments in place. So I don't know what cost that would be, but it doesn't seem to be several $100,000. Pretty inexpensive cost, with the precedent's already been set to remove that Party Bridge and bared by the residents. 10-year payment plan was mentioned earlier. That could be taxed on a yearly basis, so if the old folks are planning on moving to Tampa next year, they don't get hit with a $2,000 assessment this year, and it might ease the burden for that. And then if we are actually paying for this, what we'd like to probably see, we live in $1 million subdivision. It's a pretty nice one. I'd like to maybe see what the final outcome is going to be. And, the embankment you put on right across from North Sale, that wood railing up there looks pretty crappy. I'm just saying that out loud, but if we're paying for this, we should probably have a nicer looking bridge up there, if we have the opportunity. The contractor's getting $8 million for this. We could put some nice guardrails on it, and maybe even lamps. Make it an improvement to the subdivision, not just slap another bridge in there and him getting his $8 million and leaving. I am for the proposal earlier, or the motion earlier, that the 65 houses on the west side of Lake Shore, north of the bridge, be included in this for sure, because they have access to the bridge with their boats. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, just two last things. One of the things is the Party Bridge, if it comes out, there's a possible liability to the township, and I've heard that. And I just gotta say, and I don't know how this works, so you can talk about it later, but I know there's insurance that we must pay for this township. Well, I gotta think that if we raised our limit of insurance, because Venetian, all the home values are going up as soon as you pull that Party Bridge out, which means their tax value is going up, which means they're paying more taxes. Put that money towards our insurance that we pay for this township to erase that liability. Second thing, it's not a big thing, is the advantage to Venetian being included. I don't care one way or the other. I live in Archer. I don't even need the bridge down. I can get out to the lake without the bridge down. But I also have a small child that, I know a lot of people that live on that street that have kids, so it does truly benefit them. Those bridges do benefit them because they're running Johnny over to Joe's house, and so they are part of our sub when it comes to that. Our kids all go to school, they're always in our sub. Venetian's not isolated away from our subdivision. They are part of it, and if you included them, and that bridge going down, Party Bridge also, would raise their property values, because now if they go to sell their house, they got 5-minute access to the lake instead of 20-minute access. Property values go up, there goes more money into our coffers, which you can pay the insurance with for this liability. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, I'm Tim Ogilvy, I live on Lakeville Street, I've been a resident out here for almost 23 years. I just want to say, a couple of other people brought it up, I only drive over 2 bridges. In the 22 years I've lived here, I've gone over the Archer Bridge and the Party Bridge maybe once or twice. The other thing I wanted to say is it should be, I support it being evenly divided. Mr. King brought up the idea, we're paying $8 million as a community out to somebody to build the bridge. We need to do something to make it, we have a real opportunity as a community to do something really nice. And I'd like to see that, because at $8 million, whoever that supplier is for that could do something to make it look really nice, so we can look forward to for the next 20 or 25 years. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrea Gillette. I live on Riverdale, been there about 25 years. Excuse me. I'm in favor of leaving the Party Bridge in, although many people are not agreeing. I can see very many people with children who are walking with their kids, with pets, baby strollers, people who are exercising, riding bikes, trying to get to the bike path that we just spent a lot of money and a lot of effort on to get people access to there. If we close that Party Bridge, that means kids with bikes, small children, there's no sidewalks around there, there's no street lights in that area there. I think it would be very dangerous. A lot of people we have been seeing do come from Lakeshore, and they come right straight down the Party Bridge from Riverdale onto Archer and so forth to get to that bike path, or to also play in that park, the Awney Park, that we just spent money transferring the stuff for that new play set for the children. So, and selfishly, I use it every single day. I've got a little toy poodle. He looks forward to sniffing around the park, visiting with his friends, and I think that really does present a safety hazard, not only for the current community there, but I also think if there's a emergency, what's going on right now with the bridges is the perfect example. I mean, God forbid something happens at Lakeshore Bridge, maybe a big cabin cruiser accidentally turns the wrong way and bangs the bridge down, then we do not have an exit to get out. I think the homeowners, when they bought their houses, they knew that Party Bridge was in. It's been in for a long time. Conversation has been going for 15, 16 years. And one more question. If that bridge does come out, you had talked about liability and safety concerns, and that emergency crews have discussed, or organizations have discussed, that in fact that they don't necessarily agree to have just one way in and out. I wonder, do the voters or the residents have the right to impose that? Does that supersede the commentary that in fact could present an emergency? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dan Hayes. I live in Lakeville. I wasn't actually going to say anything tonight, but I was a little concerned with your obvious predisposition towards what your feelings are, is how this would be split up based on use. I'd really like to know how you came up with that conclusion, because as you can see tonight, it's absolutely overwhelming that no matter where you live in the neighborhood, pretty much everybody feels the same way, even Stephen. It's one neighborhood, we all use it together, whether we drive over it or bike over it or run over it or rollerblade over it or walk our dogs or take our boat underneath it. It was the same thing at the meeting at St. Hubert. We had a kind of an informal, raise your hands, and it was about 80%. I mean, I don't understand how you got to that predisposition, and that's what I'd really like to find out. Because as you can see, it's absolutely overwhelming how we feel.
Me again. So unfortunately, this project is coming in the fall and winter months. And in our community, in our neighborhood, a lot of people go south for the winter. So as a township, do you have forwarding addresses that for proxy votes? And how will that be determined within the petition process? Also, I would like to be involved, and I would like to go door to door. Being new in the community, fairly new, I don't know how to go about that. So if you could clarify that, that would be great. Because I think sending out a letter or sending out, on the website just isn't gonna do justice. So as a community, I know I've spoken to, 5 or 6 people on Lakeville, and we will go door to door. We will do whatever it takes. So if you could clarify that to us residents, that would be wonderful.
Evening, Frank Gillette, Riverdale. Question for the chief later. I'd like to know what he thinks about having 2 ways to get in and out of the bridge too, for his question. And the second question I have is, I kind of remember years ago, they sent a petition around for the Archer folks and the Lakeshore Drive to take that Party Bridge out, and I think it got turned down, if I'm not mistaken, because they had to pay for it. I want to make sure the folks who live north of that bridge now, who don't want to be included in all this right now, if they do tear that bridge out, they pay for it. The Archer people and the north of Lakeshore, they pay for the bridge, and don't put that cost on everybody else then. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close the floor for public comment, and we'll move back to board comment. I certainly won't discourage any other board member from speaking, but as I mentioned, I I've been, Mr. Batanti tried a couple times to get a hold of me today. I've been on the phone pretty regular, so I think I've got a lot of these answers and I can address some of the questions. And I'll try to clarify what's my opinion and what's a matter of fact answer. So the two options that we saw initially was either two districts, meaning the south of the South Lake Shore as one group, or split equally. There was a suggestion that maybe a third option could be a hybrid option, and one mentioned based on taxable value and so forth, but at least probably the most common hybrid option that I've been approached with is to say, well, we recognize that maybe the folks on the South Lakeshore Bridge travel multiple bridges, but to say everyone pays for 3 and they pay for 4 almost seems unfair because they don't use all 3 as they go to and from work. So one option is a hybrid. I know there were several comments from residents who are present saying that they think equal is the best way to do it. I can tell you that I heard from more than one resident who was in favor of a 2-zone district, saying that, similar to the Pardee Bridge issue, heard from residents who were in favor of keeping the Pardee Bridge issue, said, you'd asked at the meeting if we would share our comments. Our opinion is to do it in 2 zones, or our opinion is to leave the Pardee Bridge, but there was such an overwhelming number of people who spoke, we didn't want to be tarred and feathered at the meeting, so we didn't share our opinions. And that's the very reason that through a vote, I'm comfortable with saying we can look at splitting it equally amongst everyone or having 2 zones. And if it's possible to look at some sort of a hybrid option, I think you could, but if I said, okay, well, at the South Lakeshore Bridge, you could argue that you'll use the North Lakeshore Bridge, and maybe we'll ask you to participate in one of the other bridges, because if one bridge is out, in essence, once you do that, once you go with some sort of a hybrid, you're really paying for at least 3 of the bridges, in which case everybody would sort of be splitting that cost equally. So if we make 7 different options on this thing, we're gonna be a month down the road and not know what everybody wants. So unfortunately, we've got to narrow that down. And I respect the idea of possibly, dividing it up or doing an average. If I put that out to a vote, I'm gonna get so many possible responses. We've got to narrow it down to something, ask people to vote. And I apologize, but I don't see putting 3, 4, 5 options on a ballot and asking people to decide. There was a question asked about the stoplight and the 1 versus 2 lanes. There's 2 reasons that the Department of Roads will narrow a passageway to 1 lane. One is if, let's just say, for example, that the structure of the bridge had 3 beams, 1 out on each side and 1 in the middle. And let's just say that the eastern beam failed. Well, they might literally close that and push all the traffic to one side because 2 of the beams are in better shape. That occurred probably 10 years ago with the Bridgeview Bridge. There was 1 beam that failed, so they shifted the traffic. But the second and most common reason why they'll limit traffic to 1 lane is because, as the engineer explained to me, if a bridge is rated at 20 tons and it's posted at 20 tons, that means I have the right to drive over the bridge with a 20-ton vehicle. But they operate under the assumption that that bridge is in essence rated at 40 tons because at that same time, if there's a cement job going on at the end of the street and a truck is coming the other way and it's 20 tons, there's no way for us to reasonably ask one of them to stop. So a 20-ton bridge with 2 lanes is in essence a 40-ton bridge. By narrowing the width of the bridge to 1 lane, you're effectively doubling its weight limit. So the answer to the question, will it remain 1 or 2 lanes? It'll remain 1 lane because by doing so, they're doubling the limit. If when they're done, if they come up with a 24-ton limit with 1 lane, it would only be a 12-ton limit for 2 lanes. And we can argue about, well, what are the odds? That's outside of our purview. The engineer the county has the right of way on roads. They're the ruling party, so to speak. So it'll remain 1 lane. As to whether or not there's a stoplight, and I know folks commented for and against the stoplight, the presence or absence of a stoplight is not something that the residents have to petition for. If the county highway engineer indicated that they were willing to install a stoplight, but before they install the stoplight, because the majority of traffic on Lakeshore is local traffic, ultimately the hope is that within a relatively short period of time, people get used to the 2-way stop and they're comfortable with that. the primary reason why they're hesitant to put up a stoplight is not cost, but it's truly, in fact, safety, and it's a respect for people's time. Because there's gonna be a fair distance between those stoplights, what you'll have is you pull up in the morning on the way to work, the light turns yellow, it turns red. Now you've got that light on the other direction, turning green to come back onto your subdivision, has to wait possibly as many as 20 seconds before it turns green, because you have to assume that the bridge has an opportunity to clear. Now you give us a period of time for the person on the other side to come across, and for that traffic to clear before your light turns green again. And what you'll find is that light on a one-way road is a relatively long light. I'm not a traffic engineer, but let's just say it's a minute and a half. The reality is we're not used to sitting through a minute and a half stoplights. So then the potential exists, and someone mentioned road rage, and this is substantiated by actual traffic incidents throughout the country. They keep statistics. What happens is you pull up to that red light, it's dark out, you'd say, well, I know no one's coming because I'd see their headlights. But someone's got dim headlights, or maybe there's snow over the headlights. Well, that person coming in the other direction is doing 25 because they think they have the right to do 25. They're not expecting oncoming traffic at all. But somebody decides that they know better, they run the red light, and now you have a head-on collision. When you have a stop sign in both directions, it's similar to the concept of a roundabout. Roundabouts prevent head-on traffic or T-bone collisions. They're sometimes a nuisance to travel, but they reduce fatalities and accidents. Two-way stop signs are, for the most part, safer because at best, you're doing 5 miles an hour by the time you could meet someone at the bridge. And it is an inconvenience, and you're frustrated, and you say, well, they shouldn't have gone. But the likelihood of an accident, a collision, or even worse, an accident or a fatality is greatly reduced at a two-way stop. And that's the reason why the county is hesitant to put in traffic lights. But if over time they realize that people are having a problem, and again, they look for residents to call in and complain. They said they have temporary lights they can install, but in the long run, residents might get those lights and say, we liked it better when there were stop signs. There was also a comment about moving the stop signs up. And that's a reasonable comment, but the parallel that I would use is any access onto a road where there's an existing sidewalk or bike path. So for me, if I'm on Prentice, say coming from Lobostal School, heading out to Metro Parkway, there's a stop sign at the bike path. I clearly can't pull up to Metro Parkway. I stop at the bike path, I make sure the bike path is clear. Now I pull up to Metro Parkway and navigate that stop sign. So I just happened to spend the weekend with the guy who's responsible for those signs. And his explanation is the design, the purpose is you stop at the stop sign, come to a stop, and then you pull up to navigate that. Now, not everybody is comfortable with that, or they say, well, the signs should be moved, but there are standards for how those signs are placed, and that's the reason they're placed that way. So I'm not in a position to defend in the Department of Roads, but these are questions we've already asked, and those were the answers that we received. There was a comment about removing Pardee Bridge, certainly a lot of comments, and about raising the North Lake Shore Bridge. These are, for lack of a better word, these are wants and not needs. And I'm trying to do the best I can to explain that. So if we raise the North Lake Shore Bridge, somebody's gonna have a larger bridge in front of their home, and they might not like that. So it's not my right to impose that on them. If we remove the Pardee Bridge, some folks will benefit, and I recognize that, but others will, without doubt, have their safety compromised. So I'm not in the position of picking winners and losers. Had the bridge never been there, I'd understand the bridge shouldn't go in. But when we have an existing bridge, and the county has made the decision, not the township, the county has made the decision to replace that bridge. The option before the residents is to not replace the bridge. But it's not the township's option, because we're not gonna it's certainly not a vote I'm gonna take. I'm not gonna pick a winner and a loser in that subdivision. I respect both ideas, and I can understand why someone would argue for its removal, and why someone might appreciate the redundancy. But we know for sure it does serve a purpose to some homeowners. And in the event of an accident, a fire, or some traffic situation, the Pardee Bridge is priceless to everybody on the other side, even though they don't normally travel it. It does have a value. It's not for us to decide. If the residents want to circulate a petition to raise the North Lake Shore Bridge, or to do this in any other manner, this summer, Adam explained that at St. Hubert. He explained it again at JPAC. And that's the option that practically any other SAD that I know of, that's how it's done, is through a signature process. This one is different. The residents have decided not to act on the bridges, so the township is forced to make a decision. And I don't care what decision I make. If we include the North Lake Shore folks, some of them are unhappy. If we remove the Pardee Bridge, some folks are unhappy. If we raise the North Lake Shore Bridge, some folks are happy. What we're looking to do is simply this. The county has made a decision. They are responsible for roads. They've said there's 4 bridges where they need to be replaced. Where does the funding come from? Also, a point of clarification, I'd said earlier, someone mentioned, well, if the property values go up, the township will have more money to pay for things. No, we won't, because we don't collect property taxes. We use property taxes in the township for 3 things: police services, fire services, and because of vote of the people now, a library. But none of those property tax dollars come to the township. So improving property values is wise, and it's certainly something that we all want. But improving property values won't put another dime in the coffer of the general fund of the township, which is what we use to pay for liability insurance. That doesn't mean we obviously can't up our liability coverage. I think we have it at our max level right now. But this isn't about property values. It's about going arbitrarily to a neighborhood and say, I've decided that you benefit and you are detrimentally affected by a decision that I made. That's not for this board to decide. If the residents want Pardee out, the residents need to organize, circulate petitions, and make that decision. And it's a cost that the residents have to bear. So for me to arbitrarily say, I want to pull it out and you have to pay, that's irresponsible. That's not a decision we can make. There aren't grant dollars available for removing the Pardee Bridge. Someone had said we don't have to pick one option. Unfortunately, we do. The residents have not voted, and I understand there's a lot of options. This board is saddled with making some decisions so that we don't lose $6.2 million in matching dollars. And I recognize they are our dollars, and I say that all the time. It doesn't matter. If we do nothing, now we have $8.5 million problem. I'd rather deal with a $1 million problem. There's wear and tear on the bridges. That, in fact, is the method that we were using. Not saying that Mr. Smith has a 100-foot lot and Mr. Jones only has a 50-foot lot. The fact is there's the likelihood that Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones have, on average, 2 vehicles. Perhaps there's 2 drivers at the home. Certainly there's maybe a widow in one home and there's a family with teenagers in another home. But if we say everybody's driving 2 cars, everybody's driving 2 cars across the bridge. We all put an equal load. There are times when we do an assessment by footage, and this is one option, but the board has decided that we all access the bridge equally. So if you're driving across the bridge with 2 cars and you're driving with 2 cars, for the most part, we're putting the same wear and tear on the bridge. There's other ways to do it, but that's what we think is the most fair, so that's what we've proposed. There was a comment made, and it may have been tongue-in-cheek, I don't know, about culverts at bridges. In fact, we've looked into that option. I mentioned at the last meeting, and for those that weren't here, the first option that we looked at for Archer, when the county approached us, because, believe it or not, the Archer Bridge was, 3 years ago, the bridge in the worst, 2 years ago, the bridge in the worst structural trouble, what's called actually the Moon Street Bridge, or the one that's being replaced. That bridge was deemed to be the one that needed to be replaced first. And when we looked at that, we said there's very little navigability under the Archer Bridge. So we'd inquired as to whether or not we could put a box culvert in there, pave over it, and now we'd eliminate a problem for rebuilding that bridge for potentially the next generation. What we learned was 2 things. One is the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality would be in a situation where they wouldn't allow it until we did several studies to see whether water flow, water quality, and aquatic species were impacted by that, which is a lengthy, costly thing. A study you could go through and have them just say arbitrarily when you're done, nope, we've decided you can't do it. The second thing is we'd get no grant dollars. Whether I like it or not, there's a grant available for a bridge, there's no grants available for culverts. So even though it was tongue-in-cheek, believe it or not, we've looked into the option of replacing some bridges with culverts, and we found at this point that it's a difficult process. There was a question asked by one resident whether or not Public Act 188 was the proper act, and I don't know if that's something that Rob can speak to, or Adam, offer an opinion.
I think of it as the MCLs, and I think it's 41.411 governs bridges. I still believe the board's on track with any one of these value assessments to determine costs. There is not a right or a wrong answer to it.
Okay, so Yeah, so regardless of that act, you feel this is still the proper method to go through, and we have to choose one way of divvying up the costs?
That's correct.
Okay, fair enough. There was a suggestion made that if the residents, through a vote of the people, vote on removing the removal of the Pardee Bridge, now it's not the township's liability. The problem is it is the township's liability. It'll remain the township's liability, and it's the reason why, as some mentioned, back in 1999, no resolution came because the county and the township argued in essence over whose liability it was. And the fact remains, we can talk about this all day, but if and when the road is blocked and there's an emergency on the other side, there's a greater likelihood today than there was 15 years ago, and there's probably a greater likelihood 15 years from now that someone's gonna sue and there's gonna be an imposed question of who is liable and why was the bridge taken out? What was the advantage? And if the reason is, well, somebody could get a boat out even though it went against this fire code or this other condition, the bridge was always there before, it's just a risk that the township can't assume. There is a risk in liability there, and the bridge exists. I understand sending out letters to 700 residents and tabulating the results doesn't shift the liability anywhere. Someone mentioned replacing the Pardee Bridge provides an added level of security. To some folks it does, to others it has no impact. Someone asked about the time frame of the letter. The project is moving forward, so a couple points to consider. The construction so far only of the Archer Bridge has been sourced and bid out. The construction documents so the Archer Bridge, the work has been placed. The township's contributed some money. The county has agreed. They're paying the match with the understanding that the rest of the money is going to be made up through some special assessment. The North Lakeshore and South Lakeshore bridges, the engineering has been done. There's been some soil borings and condition work done, which is a third party. The engineering is done by the county. But the work hasn't even been sourced to MDOT yet, or let through MDOT's bidding process. And that work can't begin until the spring. So the timing of this is, to the extent that we can come up with a reasonable option for the residents, that's our timing. I think it's reasonable to say that if over the course of the next 4 weeks, we were to send out a letter, give folks time to send that letter back, tabulate those results, and talk about it at our November meeting. I think we said we have one November 9th. I think we could accomplish that in that time frame. But the progress of the project really isn't affected by the special assessment district. Can the residents come back to discuss this? Absolutely. We're not taking any action, but you heard the earlier board action was to pass a resolution to begin the special assessment district process. That's what we originally hoped to do tonight. Residents said, hey, give us a choice on how you split up the dollars. So we're stopping that process, but presumably a month from now, we're gonna say, here's the results from the vote, and here's how we're gonna split up the special assessment district, and we're gonna move forward. And I'm gonna go on record now saying that at that meeting, there's gonna be a group of folks that are gonna come to the podium and say, thanks for doing this, I think you've made the right decision. And there'll be another group of folks that are come and say, you guys are doing this wrong. So we got about 700 folks here. At best, we're gonna make 300 of them happy. So no matter what we do, we're just trying to do what a majority of the residents feel is fair. Someone said this is a preconceived decision not to remove the Pardee Bridge. It is on my part, yes, absolutely. I'm sorry if that offends someone, but this isn't the first time I, as a board member, have considered the Pardee Bridge. That's the reason why 2 years ago we hired the engineer to look into the cost of raising the North Lakeshore Bridge, because we anticipated that this issue and discussion was going to occur. And I apologize if that sounds cold for me to say, but yes, it's a preconceived notion because I've asked attorneys and we've looked into opinions and decisions and fire codes, and we've concluded that removal of the Pardee Bridge is a decision that this board shouldn't bear. I've made that decision anyway, so in response to the one resident's question, yes, it's a preconceived notion. Not over the last 5 minutes. I've been looking at this for a while. Our proposal is to replace the Pardee Bridge. Someone made that comment. It is not our proposal to replace the Pardee Bridge. We have no say. I literally can't go to the county and demand that they do anything with any road or any bridge. The county has the responsibility for the roads and the bridges. They receive the funding. We don't receive tax dollars to maintain any road. We have no jurisdiction over any roads. The counties come to us and said, we need $1 million to match on this. And we said, well, we looked at a possibility of looking at a road millage last summer, I should say a little over a year ago, last August of 14. The residents voted that down. That's our only opportunity to have money available to spend on roads. There isn't another source for us to make that match. So the only option we have is an SAD, but it's not our decision to replace the Pardee Bridge, it's the county's decision. Can Venetian protest? I suppose anyone can protest at any time. I might look to Mr. Huth on this, but as I understand it, if someone doesn't agree with a special assessment that say the township were to implement, they go to the Michigan Tax Tribunal?
That's true, they could, but ahead of that too, this board will have a hearing on its special assessment role, and they could also come here, but given that there's I thought the resident's question was, if Venetian was included, would their chances of them objecting be higher? And if I understand this correctly, under the current proposal, Venetian is not included, correct?
Correct.
So yes, I agree, if they are included, the chances are somebody could object would be higher, otherwise there's no reason to object.
Gotcha. Someone mentioned the gas main break and accessibility. There's different levels of accessibility and different things that can and cannot happen. There were, safety vehicles present, emergency response vehicles present at that site. Was there an ability to respond to the area during that gas main break? Yeah, but truly there could be a flood or some other occurrence that could take out South River Road, or some incident that could occur that could block the access. That's true, but that isn't necessarily a reason to say, therefore, let's reduce access even further and limit it further. I understand it's true. Folks on South Lake Shore have the most limited level of access. But a parallel to that would be this weekend, I went up to hunting camp. I knew that during the time I was there, if I were to have a heart attack, my chances of survival are limited. You're in a more remote area. There's a trade-off that occurs. But the question really is, do I have the right to say to 300 people that I'm going to choose for you to take out a bridge and reduce your opportunity for safety? And again, my perspective as a board member, I don't have that right. There were folks, as someone said, that the vote at St. Hubert was overwhelming in support of an even split. Well, two things there. Certainly, at least I mentioned the one, but the other is that, as I understood it, when there was a vote at St. Hubert, there was a discussion about doing bridges, roads, and paths, and when you lump all those together, it does kind of muddy the situation, as opposed to saying just an SAD for bridges. So when everybody benefits for the road being repaved, and you say, well, we're gonna throw in a few $100 for the bridge, it changes that number a little bit. The cost to remove the Pardee Bridge, someone mentioned it, and I think it's important to understand. Again, that would have to be borne by the residents. There are no grant dollars. We're not in a position to be able to, insist on that. The residents have to bring that forward. The style of the bridge and whether or not lamps could be added. Because this project is federally funded through a particular federal program, the way it works is real simple. The bridge has to be replaced no greater than the previous bridge. So as an example, there is an MDOT standard for the width of a bridge. So we said, make the lakeshore bridges as wide as you can possibly make them within the confines of the grant. In other words, what's the widest span that Lakeshore would accept? That MDOT would accept. And then offset that span so that through striping, you can have some area that might be dedicated for pedestrian access. But if we talk about changes in railing, changes in any of those things, the federal government is not gonna kick in. So if all the residents collectively said, we'd like a covered bridge, or we would like some additional lighting, again, that has to be borne by the residents. And it's not in my position to say, well, I think lights would be nice, so I'll impose lights on the residents. If the residents want upgrades, they've got to go through a petition process to add those. Because although someone mentioned it, and I understand that, I can see the value, you could improve the area. Do 700 people want it, or do 20 people want it? I don't know. I can't determine that. So I'm not going to ask the board to impose that. How did we come up with options A and B? Simply, we said, who benefits from what bridges? I mean, there's more than one way to do it, and I respect someone who looks at it differently, but the option is to say, if you live south of the South Lakeshore Bridge, you benefit from that bridge, but you could argue no one else does. Some have argued differently. I respect that. Someone asked about forwarding addresses for snowbirds. Any snowbird that I know has their mail forwarded, so it's not really for us. There are folks who do notify us of a change in their address for the winter months, but the vast majority of them count on the Postal Service by letting them know and have their mail forwarded. Someone mentioned going door to door. That would be, by and large, our favorite option. I do not want to decide for you how you should pay for an improvement to your neighborhood. To me, I would love it if residents went door to door. We talked about it back in June or July, and we said if we don't hear something by October, we've got to take action because we can't risk running out of the grant dollars. But absolutely, can you do it? Can you go door to door? Yes. The township clerk is the guy responsible for special assessment districts. He's the guy to talk to. You call him up or see him after the meeting, and he can explain that process. It's not something that I handle, and we do it regularly. We've done it for canal dredgings. Obviously, we just did it for road repaving for another neighborhood. We did another neighborhood in the spring at the end of the second mast, so it happens on a regular basis. Someone asked if we would ask the chief about 2 points of access, so there you go, chief, you're on. What do you think about one access point versus two, I guess, would be the question.
Good evening, everyone. Obviously, you know, the fire department is always concerned with accessibility to neighborhoods, to homes. So, of course, we prefer two means of accessing an area. As you know, the point was made, that entire area going down South River, it's a challenge for us geographically. It's a peninsula. We did have the gas leak that shut down, we had to shut down South River Road for an amount of time. Presents a huge challenge when those types of things happen. You know, we're you know, and this last week has, I think, added to my gray hair trying to figure out how to provide fire and EMS protection to parts of your neighborhood when we received the news of the lowering weight limits. So it is a concern, and you know, right now I can tell you this week, without the Pardee Bridge being there, we would have a very serious problem on our hands, and we wouldn't have even been able to get an ambulance down, let alone a fire truck, but not even an ambulance across that 3-ton bridge. And it's only because of being able to use the Archer Bridge as it's halfway torn down, and the Pardee Bridge, that we're even able to get the reduced protection down there that we are right now. So, you know, of course, we understand it's you know, you can't help the geography of the lake and the canals, but the more points of access, the easier it makes it for us. I'd say that.
There was a question asked about a previous petition. You know, it's possible that the clerk's office maintains a record of that, but I'm not familiar with that. I don't believe, I'm not sure anyone here can address or speak to a previous petition and how that went. And someone asked, who would pay to remove Pardee? Again, if the residents all came together and through a special assessment said they wanted it, and the county was willing to do it, then the residents would have to decide. The question is, are we going to impose removing the Pardee Bridge? And my answer is no. Other board members here can make other decisions, and I'll leave that up to them. But the question is, who would pay for the Pardee Bridge? Any number of people who decide that they want to pay for it. But am I going to make that decision and impose that on a neighborhood? No. By doing so, some people are going to like it and some people are going to dislike it. That's why there's a special assessment district and a petitioning process available. So those are the notes that I had. If I missed your questions, I apologize. We are genuinely trying to do what a majority of the residents want. And I recognize a lot of folks here said they'd like to see Pardee removed. I can say from emails and phone calls to my office, I have not heard a majority. It's awful close. I wouldn't try to decide one way or another. But I know that the folks who are in favor of removing the Pardee Bridge are most vocal. I think if we said we're going to remove the Pardee Bridge, I believe that I hear from a vocal group of people who are opposed to it. But you have to remember that right now, we have not proposed to remove it. So the most vocal group is likely to be the ones that aren't getting what they want, saying, I'd like to see something different. It's human nature. Sure talked enough. I don't know if anybody's got any other comments, or?
I just want to add one thing. What you see tonight, I mean, somebody asked, how did we get to this? This is the product of I mean, roughly 2 years of conversations, whether it was with the homeowners association that trustee Tominello sits on, or myself and Supervisor Verkest working with the engineer. I mean, we literally looked up the clearance that a boat needs to get under a bridge, so we could see what made sense on the North Lake Shore Bridge if we could raise that to increase access. We're not, you know, we worked through a lot of iterations here, and we would love you guys to come up with what iteration you want, but at some point the decision needs to be made, and you know, that's where we are tonight, so.
Mr. Supervisor, I have a question. A couple of times we've alluded many times to not wanting to lose a federal grant. I mean, is there a time frame under which we need to act to protect that grant money?
It's a great question. We're not the grant applicants, so the ultimate answer to that is the county, because some folks said, what if we do nothing? In essence, we're playing chicken with the county. Does the county then turn around and say, okay, we'll pay for all of the bridge? That's the question at hand. Public Act 51, which dictates how road dollars are spent on local roads, is very clear that no local road can be rebuilt without a match. And I know of no example of a local road, meaning literally a 25-mile-an-hour neighborhood road, that's ever been rebuilt entirely with county dollars. At best, it's a 50-50, and in most cases, it's borne 100% by residents. So the question becomes, does the county have the right to ask us to match the matching dollars, or share the match? And by Public Act 51, yes, they do. The township doesn't have those dollars, so if the township doesn't participate and the residents were to protest an SAD, that's a great question. What would happen then? So at this point, the county applied for the Archer Bridge. Before they did, they asked the township back in August of 13, will you share in the matching dollars? I brought it before this board, said it's $88,450. Does this board want to do it? So the board committed over $88,000 of general fund money to that match. Since that time, the costs and some of the projections of that project have grown, and because of some of those additional things not being covered by the grant, the cost has gone up. So there's additional dollars needed. At the time, we'd also been working with a local road committee, coming back with a proposal on how we can fund local road improvements. So the hope was that at that time, we'll do the Archer Bridge. If we can pass a local road millage, we'll have dollars moving forward. So the county then, and in anticipation, applied for grants on North and South Lake Shore, and they're in the process on Pardee Bridge as well. So at this point, if we said we're not giving matching dollars, the county would have to decide whether they're eating it or whether they're pulling out. And I don't think it's a responsible decision. But certainly the township by itself does not have the money to match that. But the county, as long as we're moving forward with the intent and we demonstrate a good faith effort to come up with some matching dollars, whether it's from the general fund or in this case through the SAD process, the county said, and the highway engineer said at last Wednesday's meeting, we'll front the money. It's not as if they don't have the cash flow, but they can't commit to the total matching money to the grant. They're willing to commit to half of it.
But it's clear, reasonably clear to me then, that we need to proceed with some plan within a reasonable length of time.
Correct.
It's a matter of public safety that we do that.
Right, and I will say this, in all of this discussion, both prior to Wednesday's meeting and certainly a lot since Wednesday's meeting, I've heard maybe one or two questions as to what happens if we don't do it, what happens if we don't pay, or the questions asked, doesn't the county have to pay, or are there any dollars somewhere else? Yeah, we've tried to find other dollars. The county's tried to find other dollars. We believe this is the best option.
Okay.
I've heard very little comment from residents saying we shouldn't pay anything.
I understand.
It's just how should we share the burden?
Okay.
So. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Tominello to table items D1 and D2, the Special Assessment District for the St. Clair Haven Bridge replacements, and send out a letter polling the residents as to what funding option they would prefer. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board, and thanks to all the residents for coming out and sharing your thoughts. Next on the agenda is item E1 from Chief Lopez. approval to purchase 3G modems and a 1-year data plan from Physio Control for $2,653.80. Chief?
Good evening, board members and residents. As you know, the Harrison Township Fire Department has 3 advanced life support vehicles, and one of the requirements that an advanced life support vehicle has is that they carry a cardiac monitor that can do 12 lead EKGs, and we're also required to have the capability to transmit those 12 lead EKGs to the hospital. So if someone's experiencing chest pain, the paramedic would do a 12 lead EKG, would interpret it. If they found abnormalities, they would then transmit the 12 lead directly to the hospital. It enables us to get the patient to the cath lab as quickly as possible for definitive care in the event they were having a heart attack. So in order to do that, our monitors are required to have modems to actually, with data plans, to actually transmit the 12 leads. The ones that we have currently are 2G. They're antiquated technology. We've received notification that they're no longer going to be supported, and in fact, they're starting to fail on occasion, and we lose the ability to transmit from time to time, which is not a good thing. So I contacted Physio Control, which is the company that makes our cardiac monitors, as well as the modems that we have, and got the quote that you see before you for the 3 modems. We're not alone in this, because there's a lot of other agencies that are in that same position with the 2G, and so as a result, that's why you see the discounted price Verizon, or I'm sorry, Physio along with Verizon is offering a discounted pricing, because so many agencies are having to upgrade at this time. So that reflects the discount price. So I would request that we purchase 3 of the 3G modems, 1 for each of our cardiac monitors, so that we can continue to transmit EKGs and deliver the excellent advanced life support that our agency does.
So I have a question, just real quick. Why not a 4G monitor? Why not a 4G? 4G does 3G, you know, it's backward. Why not? Because we're about, what I just seen advertisement for 5G.
Yeah, the technology is a step behind. They don't. This is the latest and greatest that they offer right now. So this is.
You figure if we're buying the modems with support from Verizon, you know, obviously whoever's maintaining the network is going to maintain it for, and they're selling 3-year plans. They're on record for supporting 3G for 3 years.
Correct.
So are these a different type of modem? When I think of a Verizon modem, I'm thinking of just the little thing you can buy at any Verizon store. Is that what we're buying, or are we buying a medical grade specialty item? No, I don't know.
It is just a little thing, but it is a specialty item that because it's specific to the cardiac monitor.
Okay, then I'll make the motion to approve the purchase of 3 3G modems along with 3 1-year data plans from Physio Control for $2,653.80 with money to come from the fire department budget.
As the oldest member on the board, I'd like to support that.
I might have to use those leads one day. I'm getting older.
We all might.
But I'd feel better if I was using 4G data.
All right, any discussion, board members? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Batanti to approve the purchase of 3 3G modems along with 3 1-year data plans from Physio Control for $26.53.80. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
Thank you, board.
Thank you. Next.
You only had to wait 2 hours.
Yeah. Next on the agenda is item F1 from the Water and Sewer Department. Mr. Axtell is here. I saw he came in late. He was representing the township at a resiliency conference, so I appreciate you wearing 2 hats today.
I'm sorry I missed all the fun earlier.
Yeah.
So the first one here is, we've talked about this in staff meetings, and I know Mr. York has offered in the past to raise this amount. It's just lately, obviously, with raising petroleum and raw goods as far as our sandstone, things of that nature, weight limits, we've been having an issue paying some of the just simple invoices coming in. So I'm asking the board to raise the limit from $2,000 to $5,000 so that I can sign off on these and they simply are paid and not making our vendors wait for the payment.
All right. Just question or discussion, board?
Make a
Hearing none?
motion to raise the water and sewer department purchasing amount from 2,000 to 5,000.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Tominello, a support by Mr. York to raise the purchasing amount for water and sewer from 2,000 to 5,000.
Now, don't get crazy with that.
Yeah.
No, and next time it'll probably be $5,010, so.
I wanna see those uniforms coming through here.
Yeah.
'Cause I'll see the bills.
You'll see them.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next is the Coleridge Sanitary Sewer Project. And I know you've worked with the engineer and the clerk's office to receive those bids. And just today, we received the bid opening was, it says October 12th, but
Dave,
correct?
Dave made a mistake. Mr.
Yeah.
Newmer made a mistake on that.
Right, so this morning, the bids were opened. I think originally we thought we'd have them in last week, but in order to give the contractors enough time, we extended it a week. We received the bids, opened them this morning, tabulated them, and, what do you got to say about that?
Well, I came to you previously about the Coleridge project, and we sent it out as one larger bid, with the station and the underground as one big project. And let's say we were less than satisfied with the number of bidders that bid on that project. The station part of the project scared a lot of bidders away, and in turn, would have cost the township a lot more dollars. So in discussing this, we tried working with the low bidder at the time, and to change this after talking with Mr. Huth, to no success. So we put it out now as in two phases. So the underground will be done first, which will in turn allow the developer that we have had a consent judgment agreement with to get his 8 homes, underway. So what we're doing is putting the 30-inch underground gravity feed in, which will still allow me bypass pumping, which is something that has never been available at that station, and it'll allow the developer to begin his project. So we put it out, we received, obviously, as you can see, many more bids, and the low bidder was Cordis Contracting, which is a contractor who has done many projects in this township, and we are satisfied with their work very well with them. And I'm asking you to approve the bid to Cordis Brothers so that they can, and they're willing to basically begin work on Monday morning.
I'll make a motion to approve the low bidder of Cordis Brothers, bid of $154,735 to do the work for the underground on Coleridge Street. Is that
Yes, sir.
reasonable? 'Cause it's not the pump station, it's the street, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, is there a motion, is there support?
Support.
All right. Just a couple comments, point of clarification, the Coleridge Pump Station is a key critical part of our infrastructure.
Yep.
And the bypass pumping there is is it 9,000 residents or 15,000 residents? Yeah, so a lot of folks, a lot of stuff flowing through there.
A lot of Selfridge.
Right, absolutely. Some of which is, high rain event type drainage for their property.
Just an overtaxing.
Right. But what we found was the contractors that bid on the sum total project were big contractors, and we priced out the little contractors for the primary work that we need done. So this board in the past approved the engineering for the pump station, natural gas backup generators, and this underground work. When we got that cost back, I think, let's see, Clark is at 286, that's where they were before.
Yeah, they were the low bidder, and when I opened that bid this morning, I just couldn't believe it.
Right.
And
But that's where they were before, so
Yes.
Clark was the low bidder on the total project for just this portion at 286. So we pulled that back, talked to the developer, the property owner, said we'd like to rebid this just for the underground work. He agreed with the delay, we bid it, and obviously it was worth it, we saved over 130,000, but we knew 286 was high. The other component of this that the board needs to understand is that the consent judgment at the time was that all that was necessary to handle those 8 lots was a 10-inch main. But we said if we're doing the work, we'd really like to put a 30-inch, so the judge said, okay, no problem. Put in the 30-inch, he's only has to pay for the equivalent of a 10-inch main. The engineer has estimated a figure in here based on what he thinks. It's important to note that that's a one-sided figure. So our township, the township engineer has estimated what that share is for just the 10-inch. I'm not going to go on record saying that that's the final say in this. There is a potential that the property owner could say, my share is 100,000 and yours is only 55 isn't fair, and I want to debate that or argue that or potentially even take it to court. So the fact that the engineer has established that our cost is 55 and the developer's contact cost is 100,000 isn't necessarily the last word. What we do know is this. If we do nothing, the guy puts in a 10-inch and we have to bear the total cost, number one. Now we have to put in a 30-inch. Number two, the work needs to be done. And we've gone through this process and we have a competitive bid. What we know for sure is Cordis Brothers, a good contractor, they're at 154. I think it's the right thing to source this work. But I don't want any board member or any resident to be misled by page 2 of the engineer's estimate saying, using the low bid, we've estimated the cost for the 10-inch sewer would be $99,685 and the township's share would be $55,000. That may or may not hold water, and I just don't want anyone to be misled if the split doesn't end up there. So.
To add to that, just for the record, Mr. Gilbert, the gentleman who owns the property, has been nothing but upstanding through this whole thing. This has been going on for over a year, and he's been held off a long time. And one of the reasons, obviously, that I wanted to rebid this was the dollars were extremely high. We hit it at just the wrong time. The economic roller coaster's heading up, development everywhere was crazy. I couldn't get contractors to bid. I can't get contractors to bid on small things earlier in the year. This was almost a blessing in disguise, and it worked out in a major economic advantage for the township.
And the developer.
And the developer. And so now obviously we will have discussions between Mr. Verkas, myself, the clerk, and the developer.
Mr. Newmer.
And his engineer. And so we will come to a reasonable solution, I am very confident, without this ever going to litigation. This gentleman wants nothing more than to develop his project in Harrison Township and move on. And that's what we'd like to move forward with tonight.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I have a question. So we're getting the underground portion done. There was, just without belaboring it, we talked about natural gas generator backups. And so can you just real quick summarize the other phases that we need to go through here?
So what'll happen after this point is this will go in almost immediately,
Okay.
is if things roll as planned. So then, once the underground is in, what that at this time will allow me, I can bypass pump with the 6-inch pumps that we have, or even if I had to rent pumps. My goal is to come to you very soon to purchase new 6-inch pumps, because the one I have, the two we have are from the 1960s, and one has failed and we can't get parts for it. So obviously, I've said those have been used at Beechwood nonstop, and that project is, still in engineering phase. We're working on it. But what this will allow is that to be able to be bypass pumped. The backup generator will come in the next phase. Once we're done with this portion, we will then put out just the station, and that's, again, will be a unique set of bidders that will bid on that.
Okay.
Instead of having the combined, because the people who can throw this underground in, as Cordis bid it in 8 days, they may end up they may bid on it and be the underground contractor that digs the hole, but it'll be a different subcontractor that puts the station in and all the controls and the panels and everything needed to do that.
Okay.
So that's we're gonna just progress. It's just, we did this to save township dollars.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Brado to approve Cordis Brothers to be the contractor chosen to perform the work for the 30-inch underground main at the Coleridge Sanitary Sewer Project at a cost of $154,735. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, board members.
Okay, next on our agenda, item G1 regarding retiree health care. Board members, at the board workshop held on September 29th, 2015, Cambridge Consulting presented two significant proposed changes to our retiree health care plans, which would save the township a significant amount while providing the same as or better health care coverage to our retirees. They indicated that they can implement these changes effective January 1st of 2016. If the board chooses to move forward with these changes, they will conduct benefits workshops and education for our retirees prior to implementation. Board members, we discussed at the workshop, two major changes, pre-65, post-65 healthcare. The plan, in essence, as proposed, was to move pre-65 employees to the HSA plan, and depending on the retiree, fully fund their HSA. Since the time that presentation was made, we did determine there is potentially one retiree that's currently paying a copay, and it may be logical to put that person into a plan where we pay 50% of their HSA.
Not a copay, a premium sharing.
Right.
Well, he's paying 20, I saw him, he was in my office today, he's paying what the deductible for the full HSA is.
No, I think we're talking about something else.
Oh, all right.
So we've got a retiree that retired under the supervisory contract, and under that contract, when he retired, he was responsible for 15% of his premiums. Now, I didn't look it up or verify it. He'd indicated to me, I have no reason to not trust the guy, but he said he's paying $220 a month for his health care currently. That's the 15% contribution. So, under this plan, I would propose that this board, in that circumstance, and similar to maybe a half a dozen other retirees, we would fund that HSA account at 50%.
Just for the record, that's $2,500 a year.
Right, so
Just
as
for the
opposed to
record.
as opposed to whatever
Which
it is.
is what the deductible is.
$2,640 out of pocket, we'd be proposing a $1,300 potential liability out of pocket. So, but either way, pre-65 retirees would move to the HSA. We would fully fund the HSA account, which would eliminate that liability for a deductible. Post-65 retirees, we would move to the Medicare Advantage Option 5 with all current prescriptions included. When we asked about the post-65 coverage, as you may recall, the Option 5 is the richest Medicare Advantage plan that we can provide to the retirees. That's the best plan that Medicare Advantage through Blue Cross offers. We had some side-by-side comparisons for each. There was a discussion about whether or not all prescriptions would be covered, and the Blue Cross representative said, well, there's a rider we can put on that says we'll cover every existing, no one would be denied any prescription they receive as of January 1. The Blue Cross representative re-quoted that business to make sure they included that rider, and there was an anticipation that there would be a minor cost. However, when they went through the process, they realized that they made a coding error, and in fact, they had quoted too high of a rate. The proposal, basically, their final response is an additional $31,000 in savings. Even though there was an additional cost, once they put in the correct county code for our area, there were some additional savings. It's also worth noting that the representative from Cambridge indicated that due to the Affordable Care Act, in about 2 years, if we do nothing, we'll be faced with a Cadillac tax, what they call a Cadillac tax, but in essence, the Affordable Care Act is imposing a tax on certain plans that have a premium over a certain amount. And several of the post-65 retirees are on plans that are old. They're experiencing consistent double-digit increases every year in premiums, in some case 24% or greater. And 2 years from now, we'll be paying, if we do nothing, we'd be paying a 40% tax, federal tax, on top of the premiums in order to continue those plans. The reality is, we went through an awful lot of information, asked the questions. I'd indicated to the benefits provider that that he and the Blue Cross representative are gonna hear way more questions from the trustees about the level of coverage than the level of savings. But the reality is, as opposed to what we'd renew for, we're looking at significant savings here, potentially $500,000. Failure to take this action, we run the risk of someday not being able to provide retiree health care. We see other municipalities reaching a point where they've said, well, we're not gonna provide anymore through the courts, we've decided we're only gonna offer you $130, $150 a month, figure it out yourself. If we're facing penalties from the Affordable Care Act and we're facing the potential to make a significant savings, I don't see how this board can take any other action than to take a look at these plans. Discussion, board members, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to move all pre-65 retirees to BCBS, Simply Blue, PPO, HSA with fully funded deductibles into an HSA, and to move all post-65 retirees to BCBS, Medicare Advantage Option 5 with all current prescriptions included.
Is there support? Support. All right, and if I might ask, we have one retiree that currently has a 15% premium contribution. Is it a fair addition to that motion to say that for that retiree, we'll
Yes.
fund their HSA at 50%?
Yes.
Continued
As
support?
previously discussed.
Continued support? Good, okay.
You know, I got a question. Some people, the pre-65 retirees, some of them, we only pay half of that deductible at
That's
this point.
correct, right, right.
So what are you doing with those? With that motion, you're moving all pre-65 other than the one
Correct.
that you just discussed.
And that's a good point, because when I wrote this, I originally began to write the motion to say from the plans, but there's Community Blue 2, there's Community Blue 12, so our current retirees, I think we have approximately a half a dozen current retirees that that retired under the plan that the current employees have, which is a $1,300 contribution to the HSA, so their liability is $1,300. So that's also an important point that you bring
So
up.
you're
and
gonna
it-
need to change your motion.
Right, and an important
amend it.
clarification. These are motion to move all pre-65 retirees to that are not currently on the
Okay.
HSA plan, right? So there are current retirees that are receiving the HSA plan and their deductibles are funded at 50%. Or we fund the HSA account at 50%. We're not proposing to make any changes to those most recent retirees.
Why don't you just say with current deductibles then? Right, because that would cover that.
I wouldn't say that. I would just say anyone who's not on the HSA,
Yes.
that's pre-65, would be moving to the HSA. And all of them would have fully funded deductibles except for one supervisory employee, Mr. Kinney.
And with the only other, not the individuals but there are individuals who may be retired prior to obtaining full retirement age. It's somebody retired with 8 years and they only get 25% of their health care paid for. I know there's
Oh,
a
yeah,
couple
you gotta,
people that fall into that category.
Okay.
oh, that's a good point.
So we would just have to,
But if they're
that.
pre-65, we'd move it to this plan.
but they would, so we have to understand, would that be addressed through premium
That's why I said
only,
with
or-
current deductibles.
Well, that's not
because-
a-
Well, yeah, but
because
that would
cover
be a
the-
fully funded HSA, but they'd pay a portion of their premium.
Okay.
Right?
I just want to make sure we're.
Right, so a point of clarification, let's say Mrs. Smith retired and she gets 75% of her health care paid for based on the number of years of service that she had, and she's paying 25% of her premium. We're not changing that, but we're changing one sort of plan to another plan and fully funding the HSA.
Well, I think the operative word is all. I mean, motion to
Right.
move all pre-65, so.
Right.
I think we're covered either way.
Correct,
So-
but for those, I think, Mr. Witt's point is that for those retirees that currently have a premium copay of 25, 50, 75% based on the years when they retired.
Right.
We're talking about that condition continues. They didn't earn full retiree health care.
So do we need to, just to be clear, do we need to add that?
I think we need to add a
Oh, I
couple of
would- I-
items. It's not all fully funded, there's some fully funded, right?
Well, no, the deductible is fully funded with the exception of Mr. Kinney. Right?
Well, no, it's not, because there's a certain group of people that when we went to the HSA, they retired under that, The township pays $13.50 of that.
But that was why,
And
that was
they-
why we added
and
the
they paid
modifier
the
to say that are not currently receiving.
The
That was what Mr. Verkey's comment just was.
Right. So, let me offer clarification. We'll say that, number one, Mr. Kinney will receive 50% of HSA.
Well, you put him in the same group as the other 6,
I
right?
understand, but his is specifically a unique one, because he was paying 15% of the premium, okay? This is, how, I'm trying to remember how we said that there would be those.
Well, I was just
retirees
trying to
that are-
make it easy, but everybody wants to argue. I was saying all I was saying was with, instead of, move all pre-65 with fully funded deductibles, just do with the current deductibles, whatever they're paying now.
But it's not
It's not a current deductible, it's different.
Deductible's a different word.
Well,
Premium-
use whatever word you want I mean, I'm not an insurance guy, I'm just trying to, once you say all, then everybody's going to come and say that they get that all.
So that's why we're
paid.
trying to clarify it.
Yeah,
So
that's
there's-
why we
There's
were
in
talking about the
essence,
Well, go ahead,
there's in
clarify it,
essence,
I'll just.
yep, there's in essence 3 groups. One is Mr. Kinney, because he retired in a unique slot when his bargaining unit had a 15% contribution to their premium expense. So Mr. Kinney will receive 50% of the HSA contribution. Current and future retirees who are involved in the HSA plan will receive, are receiving, are unaffected. So we'll say current and future pre-65 retirees currently receiving or eligible for the HSA plan are not affected, and any retirees with a 25, 50,
I'd say a premium share.
well, or 75, because that doesn't catch Bill Kinney, with a 25, 50%, 25, 50, or 75% premium contribution will continue to be liable for that contribution. Okay, so the motion is to move all pre-65 retirees to Blue Cross Blue Shield Simply Blue PPO HSA with fully funded deductibles into an HSA, and to move all post-65 retirees to Blue Cross Blue Shield Medicare Advantage Option 5 with all current prescriptions included. Mr. Kinney will receive 50% of his HSA contribution. Current and future pre-65 retirees currently receiving or eligible for the HSA plan are not affected, and any retiree with a 25%, 50%, or 75% premium contribution will continue to be liable for that contribution. So, point of clarification, and again, there's a handful of people, this is a bulk, but, so,
You're offering that amendment to
correct.
Mr. Brado.
Right. Good?
Continued support.
Continued support.
Okay, good.
Just one comment on the overall change. After talking with our agent and having great discussions about it, is our understanding as a board that we're providing the same or better health care coverage to our retirees than they had today.
Correct.
And
Right.
to add to that, we also know that there was an analysis done, and that every doctor currently used is in the plan, and every drug currently used is in this plan.
Right.
Just to-
Correct. Okay, I know we've got some folks here who'd like to participate in public comment, so if it's okay, we'll open the floor for public comment.
Good evening, Board. Frank Scher, retired firefighter. Been quite a while since I've had the pleasure of being in this room. So I'd like to start off with commending you for actually looking at the healthcare and seeing if there is a way to save money. Some of you that might not know me, I retired before you came here. I spent quite a long time as a union president for the firefighters union, so we always look for ways to save money for the township, and try to look at ways to fund the retiree health care into the future. So I've got a few questions, and I like that you guys pointed out that you are standing by it's going to be equal or better, the same or better. So that is well within the realm of the contract and what goes on. And I did have the pleasure of talking to Darren and Ken, so they explained a few things for me. And Ken, is this the comparison sheet for the PPO 12?
From this distance, I'm gonna say yes. I'm assuming you didn't pull it out
Doesn't
somewhere
matter, you know,
else.
as we're getting older, from any distance with that small print, it's pretty much the same.
I agree.
But I appreciate seeing that come out too. You know, it was my understanding when I read what was on the agenda that we were looking at trying to take all the retirees that were there and put them on the same plan because of the amount of confusion. I think you're seeing some of that here tonight where, you know, some people have 15%. I mean, it goes back as far as we had some retirees that were on the old traditional Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, which was way outdated when we replaced it with, you know, some of the current, at that time, actually HMOs and PPOs. But it doesn't sound like that's actually the case here tonight. So I don't want to get too much in depth into all the other ones right now, but it's my understanding that everything is going to be fully funded each year, and I'm on the PPO 12 to be clear, the Blue Cross Blue Shield PPO 12. So right now, I'm in an HRA, the healthcare reimbursement part of it. So I go in, I pay out of pocket, I turn my bills into basic, they reimburse me, and now that's actually funded by the township. And I just want to make sure that when we're talking equal or the same, so that my out-of-pocket is equal or the same. And I want to make sure, I know you guys don't go back and forth, but these are questions I would like to see answered on the record if I could tonight, that is the intent, that there's no loss of benefits, no loss of out-of-pocket expenses at the end of the day with this plan. And I believe that is what the intent is here today for that HRA. Replacing that HRA for that group of people, because it wasn't specifically discussed up here in the motion. So, you know, understand that it's a high deductible plan, and today we're gonna fully fund it. It was $2,500, now it's up to $2,600. And I just wanna make sure that it's on the record in that motion, if you guys could look at that you're gonna continue to fund it, because today you guys are here and I understand your intent. But 6, 8, 10 years down the road, I'm looking at 7 or 8 new faces, and they say, well, you know, we're not, you know, the new high deductible healthcare is $3,700, and we're not gonna fund this anymore. So I wanna make sure that that's gonna continue to go up in the future. And, you know, the other thing, because normally we'd be sitting down at a negotiating table, we'd have an addendum to a contract, because I've got my last contract, that's what I went out under, that's what you're supposed to get. So I don't know if there's some intent to put something in writing, some kind of an addendum for the people that they have something to go by in the future when you guys aren't sitting up here, when there's another group of ladies or gentlemen sitting up at this table, that we have something to refer to and they also have something to refer to. And the last thing that I would like to touch on, and I know my time's up, so I'll make it brief, is every time we've gone through this and we've looked at a way to save healthcare costs for the community, and we're back here again, and, you know, as Ken said, you know, we have to look at this seriously, because at some point, if we don't, it's gonna be tough to fund retiree healthcare in the future. So we did set up some healthcare savings vehicles, and that's kind of what you're asking the employees in the HRA to do. You're saying, let's put you on a health savings account. You know, we're gonna make you responsible for it, it's your money, you're gonna decide when you're gonna go to the doctor. I don't think that's such a bad plan, personally myself, I'm not gonna speak on behalf of other people. But is it your intent with this money to put all, or at least a good portion of this, towards funding retiree health care in the future? Because you do have some vehicles set up to do that right now. At one point, we were looking at Aviva, and I think it's a, Ken, can you correct me, you know, the correct term for the account?
OPEB account?
Yeah, the OPEB accounts. So we don't have to continually look at this. We can take some of that money and put it in there, which is what we've always tried to do in the past, anytime that they've come to the employers or the retirees to try to save some money. And I think it goes a long way to show the intent of the board that it's truly about looking at a way to try to fund this healthcare deficit that's going on. So, you know, I would like to see that possibly as part of the motion, if you could, or at least a discussion on it tonight, that we look forward to doing something like that. So we're starting to fund that in the future, because that's gonna start earning interest, making money, and the next time that something comes around, and I guarantee you that it will, where they're gonna have a different plan that's gonna come out with a different type of deductible strategy that may be beneficial to the township, and I'll guarantee you that you'll get wholehearted support if you guys look at taking some of that money and putting it towards that future funding of the healthcare versus, you know, just trying to balance a budget with it. You know, when you're looking to balance a budget, I was on that end of the table too when I wasn't a retiree. You guys, you know, a lot of times you came to the employees, and then you came to the residents and said, listen, you need to determine the types and levels of services that you want in your community, and look at selling a millage. And if the people don't want to fund that, you know, I mean, you hate to say it, and I would never recommend reducing services. I would always vote for increase in services, but if that's what the residents want, well, you know, I mean, unfortunately, they kind of get what they pay for. So I would hope that you guys would look at that tonight, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tracy Holcomb. Like Frank, I also am a retiree, served as union president. I also think it's commendable you found a way to save money. My only concern is that any gaps in coverage for any employees, it's your intention to make them whole in some way. And like Frank said, I would like to see this money that you're gonna save, if it's upwards of $500,000, go towards future retiree health care costs, because we all know that it is gonna go up, and it's not gonna be used in some other way, some other want, some other desire that you have. And like Frank said, I think it would go a long way for the retirees. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask, is this about the retiree healthcare?
No.
Okay, there'll be a time at the end of the meeting when public comment, yep, that's all right, when public comment will be open for any item, so, and I'll make sure I point it out. Is there anyone else regarding this topic? Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. So, a couple of notes that I have. Certainly one of the advantages of this plan, currently with the HRA, retirees are responsible for a certain amount of out-of-pocket expenses, and various retirees are reimbursed then at various levels upon submission of paperwork for that difference. So the way that the pre-65 plan works is for the first $2,600 of expenses, no matter what those expenses are, you are responsible for 100% of the first $2,600 of expenses. Now, that could be, say, a medical incident that occurs on January 5th. You're in the hospital, maybe there's a major surgery. Clearly, $2,600 doesn't go very long. That deductible is gone. It could be gone in the first few days of the year. On the other hand, you could have a relatively light, or I guess fortunate, or good health, whatever you might say, and you may not even experience $2,600 in expenses. Or if you have just one maintenance prescription, for example, and maybe it's a relatively simple blood pressure medication that you can get at Walmart, Meijer, or whatever, $10, that might be your only expense. In that situation, the township will deposit into an account under your control $2,600, unless, say, for example, for the current retirees that are at 50%, that doesn't change. But for those folks that are on Community Blue style plans, we have $2,600 goes into an account. Attached to that is basically an ATM or debit card. You go to the doctor's office and they say, well, today's office visit wasn't covered whatsoever because you haven't met your deductible, it's $80. You give them the card, they charge that account $80, you're done. If you get to the end of the year and you haven't spent that $2,600, it remains your money. You don't pay taxes on those dollars. They go in tax-free and they come out tax-free as long as they're spent on some health care. So for example, if you don't spend those dollars, if you only have $2,200 of expenses that you would incur in the course of the year, and you go to get a pair of glasses and there's an extra $100 for a pair of frames, you give them that card, the $100 comes off. From there, you can use that money tax-free. You can actually use that money for non-healthcare expenses, but under that circumstance, it is a taxable gain. So if you're a young retiree like Frank and you're able to save up your $2,600 over the course of a few years, and when you turn 65, you can keep that money in an account and continue to use it for healthcare expenses. But at least one of the advantages, there is no reimbursement. Basically, the township gives you the $2,600 up front. It goes into an account. You get immediate access to it for anything, but certainly for medical expenses, it's on the spot. So there was a question, they were looking for no loss of benefits and no increase of expenses. It is the board's intent to provide equal or better coverage. So we've gone to a plan that we believe is familiar at least to some of the retirees, or I should say, some of the pre-65 retirees may still have relationships with current employees, and we felt that one of the attractions of this plan is that literally you can ask the currents. Frank has the ability to go to the current firefighters and say, how does this plan work for you? What's the pluses and minuses, the strengths and weaknesses? One of the things that ends up being an additional expense in this plan, in this HSA plan, is the copay on medications. So there are various copays on previous plans for medications. This plan comes with a $10.60 copay on prescriptions.